Hello, I'm Montgomery County Executive Ike Leggett. As a veteran of the Vietnam War, I fully understand the cost of freedom, and I know how important it is to provide resources for our veterans and their families. That is why I established the Montgomery County Commission on Veterans Affairs in the year 2007 to make recommendations regarding how the county can better serve our veterans. I never forget that the freedom we enjoy today came at an extremely high cost, which the many Montgomery County residents who have lost loved ones in service to our country know all too well. Stay tuned. I hope you'll enjoy this important program, The Cost of Freedom.
Hello, I'm Steve Simon, and welcome to The Cost of Freedom. This is a discussion series about our returning warriors, about the issues and challenges they and their families face before, during, and after deployment, and about how we can help them return all the way home. Since 2003, the United States has been at war on two fronts, in Iraq and Afghanistan. Unlike previous wars, a small portion of our population, just about 1%, has been carrying the burden of repeated years of constant war. Brigadier General Laurie Sutton has said, "Serving our military is a responsibility for each of us as citizens. You don't have to wear this uniform to serve our military. What will it take to bring each of our warriors all the way home?" Our first program today is a panel discussion about deployment and reintegration. On the panel, we have Dr. James Bender of the Defense Centers of Excellence for Psychological Health and Traumatic Brain Injury. Dr. Bender served in Iraq from 2008 to 2009. Mr. Eric Toribio is a student at Montgomery College who served in the U.S. Navy from 2001 to 2009 as a petty officer, 3rd class. He was deployed to Afghanistan in 2001 during Operation Enduring Freedom, and to Iraq in 2003 for the launch of Operation Iraqi Freedom. Mrs. Jessica McNerlin works as the Military Outreach Coordinator for the Mental Health Association of Montgomery County. She will discuss her role in supporting both military veterans and their families, and also her personal experience in working through the readjustment process for her own boyfriend after his 2 deployments. Finally, we will hear from Mrs. Leanne Dorflinger. Mrs. Dorflinger is a Gold Star mother whose son, Army Specialist Thomas Dorflinger, was killed in action on November 11, 2004, Veterans Day, in Mosul, Iraq, after being activated just 1 month earlier. We'll begin our conversation with our panel and special guests in our studio audience in just a moment. But first, here are some of their thoughts on the cost of freedom.
Deployment is a really, really big deal, and the war is still going on. You don't hear about it much in the news, but for people, especially guys on their 2nd, 3rd, 4th deployment, it's literally life-changing events. It was a bit of an adjustment. I remember driving down the expressway in downtown Chicago and driving under an overpass, and the first thing I thought was check for snipers, do your box check. And I really had to throttle back and say, oh, okay, wait a minute, I'm not in Iraq. It's fine. And, driving was a bit of a challenge. Driving down the road, I'd see a pile of garbage and swerve, this could be a problem. And then I had to take a minute and say, okay, it's only a pile of garbage by the side of the road.
It was rewarding because I know I'm from New York, and I used to actually rollerblade in New York, the Twin Towers. So being over there, knowing that we were going to be fighting against Taliban, and was just kind of rewarding, just being there. My first deployment, I was married but no kids. The second one was tough because actually I left when my wife was 7 months pregnant 7.5 months pregnant. So when I came back after the 6 months, my son was probably like about 5 months or so. So it was tough when I was on deployment and knowing that my wife was gonna be by herself in New York. But it was rewarding when I came back and I saw my wife and my kids for the first time after 5 months.
Well, when Luke deployed, he was with the invasion in Iraq in 2003, and he came back in the fall of 2003, and that's when we met. And we were together for 8 months before he left again in 2004. We were together for 2 deployments, and every time you always watch the news. You know, I always watch the news. They would show Marines in Iraq, and I would just watch and think maybe, you know, he would be on there, or I would be able to see him. You have to go through your day-to-day life, but continually knowing that something could have happened or that something might happen is so stressful.
He'd only been in Iraq less than 4 weeks, just a little under 4 weeks. It was November the 11th. He was a driver of a Stryker vehicle, and his vehicle had been damaged in combat operations already, so it was in for repair, and he volunteered for a position in this patrol. They were going out to a police station. Actually, the day he died, I was listening to the radio, and there was a mention of heavy combat in Mosul, and I thought, good, it's afternoon, this happened hours ago, I haven't heard anything, he's probably fine, no mention of casualties. Hour and a half later, the men came to my door. They walked up to the front door, and I could see them through my window, and I opened the door, and I knew it was over. We knew he didn't want to be buried in Arlington, so for whatever reason, he had decided that he had signed a contract with the Army that lasted 5 years, but eternity belonged to him. Now our role is to honor the memory of the dead.
Welcome back. We're joined once again by our special panel of guests for today's discussion on the cost of freedom. And I want to welcome all of you to our show today. And Leanne Dorflinger, I want to start with you. You are a Gold Star mother, and for those that may not be familiar, what is a Gold Star mother?
A Gold Star mother is the mother of a service member who died on active duty. There's a banner that goes with this. Blue Star families have a member who is actually on active duty, and then the tradition is if someone is killed that they're given a Gold Star to cover the Blue Star on their banner.
And as a Gold Star mother, you are the mother of Thomas Dorflinger, who, as we said before, killed in action on Veterans Day of all days. But let's go back. Tell us, who was Thomas Dorflinger?
Who was Thomas? Thomas was one of the most reserved individuals you've ever met. He was in high school. He was a student at Springbrook High. He was in the International Baccalaureate program. He hated paperwork, so he would do tests but not turn in his homework, which led to terrible grades. So when he decided he wanted to apply to West Point, he didn't have the grades, although his test scores were all quite wonderful. But when he realized that West Point was not going to happen for him, he decided he did want to still join the Army. September 11th had happened during his senior year of high school, and he went out. He actually joined the reserves first, but realized that this was not going to work well with a college schedule, and he wasn't even really sure he wanted to do college immediately anyway, so he decided to change to active duty, which he did. He signed his own papers. He turned 18 on July 6th, and I said, you have to sign your own papers, because if anything happens, I just want to make sure it was you who signed, not me. And he was willing to do that, and that is what he did. He went to basic training in October of 2002, and at Fort Benning in Georgia. He was a bright kid. He was very intellectual, but he was looking for a purpose in life, and he found it, I think, in the Army, and found some direction for himself afterwards. He had signed a 5-year contract, and that first 2 years, the only 2 years he was in, he decided he would go, when he got out, he would go back to college. He would become an English teacher, because that was really his strength, was words. He was a wonderful writer. And
before the show, you were telling me that his English teacher was very influential, so he had seen a plan for his life there.
He had seen, he really had become a good friend of his English teacher. Actually, he wasn't even his English teacher yet. Tom Tobin was was the IB English teacher for seniors at Springbrook at that time, and he also was the advisor for the Catholic Club, which Thomas had joined, and proceeded to just astonished Mr. Tobin by recounting the more subtle thoughts of St. Augustine on God and eternity. That was kind of Thomas. He hid himself in his room and read St. Augustine. I think that kind of brought Mr. Tobin to see something very special in him, and they developed a friendship over the years. So actually when Thomas died, we had Mr. Tobin do one of the eulogies at his funeral. He just had gotten to know him so well.
November 11th, 2004.
Yeah.
Tell us about the call and what you learned from that call.
Actually, it was a notification team. It was people who came to our door. You see this on television, you see it in movies. Two men in uniform came up our step at, you know, I guess it was 2:45 in the afternoon, because I was sitting there thinking I need to get ready to go to work. I was supposed to go to work at 4 because I work in a store. But I looked up and there were these men coming up my walkway, and I knew there had been fighting in Mosul that morning because it had been reported on the news. And there had been no word of casualties, so I thought, okay, this had been like 5 hours later. It must be okay. He's okay. I knew he'd been in combat, even though he never told us he was in combat. I knew from reading press releases in the Stryker News website. Thomas was a driver of a Stryker vehicle, which is an armored personnel carrier on wheels. And I knew the Strykers were in Mosul at that time, and I knew there'd been heavy fighting. But I had felt kind of bad all day, and I was worried about him, obviously. He'd only been there a month, actually just a bit less than a month. And when I looked up and saw these men coming up the step, I was just, it was like, oh, you know, my world's changed. It's never going to be the same. And I was home with my youngest child, who was 11 and a half at the time. So I sent him out of the room. I let the notification team in. They did their classic letter, you know, the Secretary of the Army. And actually, I couldn't tell you what he said after that. I knew what had happened. And all they knew was that Thomas had been killed that morning. And that was all they could really tell me. They gave me some papers to deal with the press, to deal with things. They asked if there was anyone who could be with me. And I had to call my husband. I had to call my daughter. My younger daughter was actually in basic training at Fort Leonard Wood at that time. She had planned to join the Army Reserves, but after this happened, actually took an entry-level separation. She decided she would not be able to handle going to Iraq, and I think that was a wise decision. That day just kind of went on. I called those people, and the word spread very quickly among our friends. Of course, Thomas's name wasn't released until the following day, because they give you time to notify next of kin and people who are not nearby. And you know, within an hour of his name being released, we had, you know, 3 television stations on our front step. My eldest daughter actually talked with the reporters. They agreed to do just sort of a pool of reporting, and one of my neighbors went out there to make sure that they treated her well, and that is the interview that actually appeared that evening on several stations. And actually the Washington Post reporter, I think, was there at the same time, and they all took notes from that. So Anna did a wonderful job, but you know.
Well, Leanne, we know how hard it is to go back and share that story, but that's part of what we want to do. Yep. With this kind of discussion is the important sharing that you're providing for others. And Eric, I'm watching as Leanne is talking, I'm watching you, and you served 8 years, 2 tours in the Navy. And what are you thinking when you hear the perspective of a mom from that experience, having served yourself and thankfully back with us here?
Just to listen to his stories, it's tough. Even though it's different missions where we serve. Thomas was in Army land, and I was actually deployed in Theodore Roosevelt and Enterprise. Mm-hmm. It's kind of 2 different scenarios, but still, first, I experienced people jumping overboard. I experienced also actually a lieutenant who disappeared while in 2001, right after we crossed the Suez Canal. I see this lieutenant almost every day. and all of a sudden, just knowing that he disappeared, nobody couldn't find him. It was shocking just to say that this guy, we found him. We found his body 3 days after it was announced that there was disappeared. Nobody couldn't see him. Nobody knew anything about him. It was shocking because also he used to give me chocolate and candies. And after you've been on deployment, you just candies and anything becomes really gold. And
what does it say about all the people who say the little things? What can we do? How much do the care packages mean when
well,
they
do means a lot. Oh my God, you have no idea. Everybody just sent when families sent cookies and letters, anything. And what we did was that when we knew that somebody didn't receive anything, we'll share. And I mean, people would just, as I say, go crazy just knowing that mommy or daddy or friends send them cookies, homemade cookies. So it's very very good motivation just knowing that, you know, we receive letters. You know, we receive letters probably once a month. You know, so it's very touching.
I want to shift to Jessica and to Dr. Bender and talk a little bit about some of what we're hearing about. What are the issues that the veterans are going to face and the families of veterans? What are the challenges that they really face? And probably what we should do is go back, if we could, Dr. Benders, talk about your time actually stationed in Iraq, and then some of those perspectives of working with the soldiers.
Sure. I was a brigade psychologist for the 4th Brigade, 1st Cavalry Division out of Fort Hood. We spent a year in southern Iraq. And, you know, when you talk about the cost of war, people talk about, you know, well, money, bullets, you know, casualties. But, you know, no one really knows afterwards. You know, we'll be paying for these wars for the next 30, 40 years, unfortunately. Most people who deploy, they do very well. They go, they do their time, they come back, they reintegrate well. There's no real problems to speak of. But of that small percentage who, you know, get a traumatic brain injury, they get hit in the head and have, you know, any one of many complex neurological problems. Unfortunately, some of those problems are lifelong. There's new developments, new treatments. You know, the science has really skyrocketed. Unfortunately, we've had a lot of practice, you know, doing this kind of thing. But, you know, for that small percentage of people who are unlucky enough to suffer these injuries, it can be a lifelong debilitation. You don't really hear about that much when you...
And what was your assignment specifically? I mean, tell us about the work in Iraq.
I was a brigade psychologist. I was, you know, the mental health officer for about 3,500 guys, and did a lot of different things. Traveled a lot to we were stationed at a main base where I spent a fair amount of time, but I also traveled to the small outlying bases, combat outposts, where you know, I had a patient load of soldiers, and some of what we did was, you know, treating people with pre-existing conditions. A lot of what we did is we stressed resilience and prevention, like things you could do to prepare yourself for a stressful situation that would make you much less likely to, you know, develop a mental health problem. And, you know, we really stress those a lot. You know, we call it resilience, battle mind. We had a couple programs. You know, I helped develop a program, One Shot, One Kill, that, you know, really talked to the soldiers to, on how to kind of make themselves mentally tough, if you will. And that, in a nutshell, is what I did.
And that is a very different mission, trying to help them through the psychological issues and everything while they're, you know, in the battlefield. But Jessica, I should turn to you, because I think it's important that now, as a community, and communities are understanding this issue of it's going to take many years to work through, putting programs in place. You're with the Mental Health Association in Montgomery County, so describe your role and how you work with veterans and families with the issues they're facing.
What I do at the Mental Health Association is kind of
provide a network. You know, when families are dealing with this, you know, if you're a veteran of Vietnam, Persian Gulf, or you're a veteran of the conflicts that we have today, where do I go for help? You know, who can I talk to, whether it is a mental illness, like Dr. Bender was talking about, or you just want to know who you can talk to get benefits information. I mean, some things that, you know, you might take for granted that we already know about, you know, sitting here at this table. But what don't they know? What's available to them? What resources can they access, you know, just by being a veteran?
Just let's add your personal perspective, because this probably gives you, you know, a real personal knowledge of some of the issues they may be facing. Tell us about your experience, your boyfriend having been deployed and working with some of his issues and readjustment back into civilian life.
Mm-hmm. He was deployed 3 times to Iraq. He was there first in 2003. We met in 2004 when I was a senior in high school. He deployed again in 2005, then again in 2006. Both times were completely different. You take for granted all the things that you had when you're there. And his first deployment, I was a freshman in college. And we always talk about how when I was a freshman, everybody's there and they're saying, oh, I miss so-and-so, I haven't seen him in 3 weeks. And I would roll my eyes and say, oh, okay, well, maybe I can watch the news tonight and maybe Luke will be on CNN or something. And, you know, you do those kinds of things because that's all you have really to hold on to. But
and I want to bring it back to Leanne in a moment, but one of the things that we talked about before was that this is in a smaller town where your experience was, and I think there's a difference between a larger metropolitan area where we are here in Maryland to maybe that experience. What were some of the things that went on in the small town environment when he was deployed?
I mean, the greatest example I could think of is, I mean, when we met, I was a senior in high school, and he came back from Iraq the fall of 2003, and our school wanted to do a paper on him for the school newspaper. I mean, they knew who he was, they knew what his experiences were, and that's how I met, was through an interview through a school paper. And just a huge community support whenever somebody deploys. We had a chiropractor uptown Main Street. He would always put their names, you know, up on big white, you know, banners in his office. Sometimes he had 3 or 4 guys just from our town alone.
Which seems to imply sort of a community of support, and I don't think that we're in an area that's not supported. But Eric, I don't imagine there was these banners when you were deployed, and with your son Thomas. I mean, it must be different. It's a monumental event for friends and family, but you don't really have that sort of, you know, entire community support. Eric, let me ask you to tell us a little bit also about what you think we should know about how we can most help a returning veteran.
As we were talking earlier, I think the most important thing will be to get help on all those veterans, especially when they're getting out. Information about the benefits, where to go in case I know some people that they went homeless after a while, and they're facing some issues also with families. When they come back from deployment, wife took off with, you know, somebody else, with the kids, took the car, everything, and that's one of the issues also that Navy sailors face, that when they come back, though either they try to commit suicide, they just go, you know, crazy, and they don't know where to go. They don't know where to go, and also that they also are forced to get out of the Navy or being separated of the Navy for mental issues or for any others mental.
Leanne, your perspective from the family standpoint.
From the community support issue, you know, I don't think anyone noticed that Thomas was gone, that he had deployed. His friends did, and but in terms of community, you know, because there aren't really towns here in Montgomery County, most of it is not incorporated, and the part we live in is not. It wasn't really a question of people putting up banners or, you know, even his high school. I mean, he left from the high school. I don't think they actually, I mean, his teachers knew, but kids in grades down from him didn't know. when he was killed, we did get a lot of community support. Just kind of the surrounding area, people we knew. You know, my PTA friends and buddies were people who brought us food and made sure that it was food after the funeral, and there were people who came and sat with us and made sure that we were not left alone. And but there really wasn't that support network, while he was overseas. It was, or even when he was just at Fort Lewis waiting to go. I don't think people really, really were aware that that's what was going on. And if I told them that he had joined the Army, it was kind of, people were not, dismissive, but they really just didn't know quite what to make of it. And so many of us are products of the Vietnam era. I think that we've all kind of forgotten how to honor service members, and it would have been nice, but I don't blame anyone for not having done things that they didn't do. It would have been nice, but that's.
Jessica, let me ask you to talk a little bit about at least the effort to try to tie in resources. How the nonprofits and the local governments, and what kinds of things are being done here, and what kinds of things still need to be done to really strengthen that umbrella.
Well, I know in Montgomery County we are working really hard to make sure that we're getting the networks connected. Which nonprofits are serving in this particular area, or what county government organizations can work in this direction. I sit on a Veterans Collaborative, that's the main goal, is just making sure that everybody knows which services are there. If you don't have that service, do you know of another organization that can? So when a veteran walks in your door or is on that phone call, you know how to serve them the best. And the community support is important.
Dr. Bender, you want to talk a little bit about let's talk about your role back stateside, if you will. Do you find yourself going back, how often are you revisiting your experiences there? Because you're not just coming in as a specialist from your own experiences, you have to work through that. Talk a little bit about that.
Right. Went straight from the Army to the Defense Center of Excellence, which is a Department of Defense initiative that deals exclusively with psychological health and traumatic brain injury issues. And my military experience has been invaluable, but I found that there is a lot more support, a lot more political will to, as well as an appreciation of mental health issues. Back in the Vietnam era, a guy would have a PTSD flashback. They call it cowardice. They kick him out, throw him in jail.
I'm going to make you say that for everybody that may not have caught the acronym PTSD. Go ahead.
Post-traumatic stress disorder is a mental disorder caused by an exposure to an extreme stress, maybe a rape, or in this case, a combat situation. Post-traumatic stress disorder has been around for as long as war has. There's Greek stories and plays where they talk about, how battle changes people. It has not been understood nearly as well as it is today. And that's heartening to see, back in kind of the bad old days of mental health treatment in Vietnam, they'd say, oh, you're just a dirtbag, get lost, kid. Now we can appreciate and understand a lot better. And maybe one of the positives to come through this is, 5-10 years down the road when, that poor rape victim is having PTSD, we can handle that a lot better. Or 10 years from now when this high school football player gets hit in the head and has a concussion, we can deal with that a lot better. And that's a direct result of, the funding and support. When I say I mean DECO and, just kind of the medical community in general has been given to really, aggressively pursue this. So that is a little bit of a positive. Is the cost worth it? No, not by a long shot, but what's done is done.
Eric, your perspective as a veteran, how does war change you?
Actually, going to two deployments, when I joined the Navy, I was just 21, but going to two deployments, it definitely made me mature a little bit sooner, I will say, and seen and done and work and on the flight deck, which is dangerous. It can also keep you a little bit more aware a little bit of the situations. And just like I said, I think that makes you mature a little bit sooner than what a normal person probably would.
And we're going to get into a little bit more, and I wanted you to first give us a preview of this, because we have some folks that have been waiting patiently out in the studio audience, and we're going to get to them in our next segment. But one of the things that has helped you, and we want to talk about the issues of reentry, is that you made a decision to go back to school, and tell us a little bit about that, because in some places maybe people just come back and try to enroll in college and make a decision what to do, how to go forward. In Montgomery College, there was a program that sort of helps with that reentry, and I think you might be able to tell us a little bit about that.
Combat to College. Actually,
Combat to College.
Combat to College. Actually, when I was in the Navy, just working on my transition to getting out of the Navy, my wife and everybody was, telling me to go ahead, advising me to go back to school. Since I was actually going to school while in active duty, but it was a little bit hard also. But now when I went to Combat to College, I was afraid. I was afraid to go to school. I didn't know what to expect. I didn't know what the civilian life is again. And actually, Combat to College, from the moment I went to the website, they popped over there, Combat to College, and gave me all the information. And from the moment I called, they just went in.
Seemed to be speaking right to your need, hopefully.
Completely. So everything was easy.
We're going to talk more about that particular program and all of this discussion. We're going to come back with our discussion on the cost of freedom in just a moment. Don't go away.
Are you ready to go back to school? Combat to College makes it easy for returning veterans to earn an education at Montgomery College. Combat to College provides an easy transition into student life with academic advising, counseling, veteran activities and outings, open gym hours exclusive to veterans, and much more. Montgomery College invites veterans to start their academic careers. For more information, visit www.montgomerycollege.edu/combat-to-college.
Welcome back. We're joined once again by our special panel of guests for today's discussion on the cost of freedom. And I want to thank all of you who have been with us on the panel in the first segment. And this is kind of fun because here in the second segment, we want to get the studio audience that's been waiting patiently, that's joined us. We want to get them involved, and they might have some questions for all of you. And I want to toss my own question out in the front row to Rose Sachs, professor at Montgomery College. Eric, and right before we went into break, we're talking about Combat to College. And Rose, this is a program that has become very important to the returning veterans that you all were involved in setting up. And I think it's important that people get an understanding of what is Combat to College with the digit 2 in there. Explain Combat to College.
Let me tell you just briefly how we started, because I think that this is really critical, and respond to some of the things that Eric was saying. We were approached by some folks from the community, and 3 counselors and some folks from the Veterans Administration, Medical Center, and National Rehab Hospital, and so forth, sat down and decided to create a program. And really what we wanted to do was ensure that our campuses were welcoming and friendly. We took a look at websites. We didn't find much. And the one thing we didn't find was thank you and welcome back. And that was the very first thing we did. We started developing programs and looking for veterans, because this is not a population that comes asking for help. I think the critical moment for us is when we were able to hire 2 wonderful Montgomery College graduates, a veteran and his wife, who are really running this program. And I'm going to ask Jason Franklin to talk a little bit, because he's the one, and Joanna, who are really out there with the folks who are coming back.
Jason, you're on.
Jason, you're on.
Hi, how are you doing? Currently, I'm the fitness coordinator for the Combat to College program, and we have done the best that we can to try to center the program, not focusing on any form of pathology or trying to cure or fix anyone when they come back, other than we try to create the program as a academic and social support program for veterans and service members. So when they return, if they need help with books, we try to help them with money for books at the beginning of the semester, not halfway through the semester, as the post 9/11 GI Bill provides a book stipend, but it doesn't come until later in the semester. Most veterans are used to a very active lifestyle, whether you're out at the field, you know, an infantry Marine will walk hundreds of miles over the course of several weeks, just alone, moving, you know, and that could be just in training. So we provide the open fitness center hours, so those who need to relieve stress, also maybe maintain their health, they have an opportunity to de-stress in the fitness center. We also, for those who prefer fitness activities that are kind of outside the box, we also provide martial arts programming, and also we were approached by a group called Acupuncturists Without Borders, and they started after Hurricane Katrina, helping those relieve stress after the victims of Hurricane Katrina. The program has since then has moved and is being studied by the Veterans Association to help with veterans with post-traumatic stress disorder, and also just helping with sleep disorders and a variety of other things to calm and relax the veterans. So we provided, they came to us and said, we'd like to provide this for us, so we were able to set up a community-style acupuncturist, I should say community-style acupuncture setting where we can bring a group of individuals in, they can be treated, and about 20 to 40 minutes later, they're usually de-stressed.
I want to bring back a couple of members of our panel on this point. Jess McMurlin from the Mental Health Association of Montgomery County and Dr. Bender. We're hearing about a program that is working when we have people going back into a college environment, trying to pick up their education. There's a lot of people that are looking for other resources, returning to their existing jobs or into society in other ways. This seems to be the kind of thing that we need to see more of, but what kind of resources are out there, number one, but number two, if we had to send a message out to those employers, what should they know about trying to help in the reentry process?
I think one thing that they could do is just listen. You know, just like Rose said, you know, thank you, welcome home, now what do you need? You know, just opening that ear. I know, like I said before, in Montgomery County, we have the Veterans Collaborative. They're working to ensure that people are communicating, people are outreaching and letting them know that, again, just like Rose said, this isn't necessarily a population who's going to come to your doorstep asking for help. You know, you have to put the message out there that you have the resources available to them.
And Dr. Bender, there's a difference between the injury we can see and the injury we can't see. So how difficult is it to try to help people understand that while there may not be the visible injury, they should be understanding or aware of the issues that the veterans may be facing?
Sure. Kind of a complex question, but you know, that kind of chronic stress can have a lot of cognitive deficits. People may often do have trouble remembering, concentrating. So, you know, maybe, you know, people, the veteran population, of which I'm proud to be one of, tend to be a little more physically active, hands-on. You know, the military really, really, you know, strongly emphasizes there's a problem, fix the problem, move on, and let's not talk about it in committee for, you know, hours or days. In some jobs that, you know, again, that's valued very much. You know, one thing you said that I completely agree with is, you know, let's not assume people are broken. Let's not assume we need to fix everybody. Let's help people succeed, but let's not, you know, a piece of advice I can give an employer is, you know, expect a fair amount from your veteran because, you know, many of them have proven themselves to be more than competent. So I really hesitate to say, well, this is how you have to treat a veteran differently. Don't, you know, make any loud noises or do anything like that. Because, you know, most veterans do very well. You know, but in terms of things to realize, you know, just know that, you know, thanking for them for their service, not assuming they're broken, and really just, you know, taking them on their own merits.
Great advice, great advice.
Yeah.
Let's go out to our studio audience, and we got to have a question out there somewhere, I know, so We have a great panel here. You heard from a Gold Star mother. You've heard from a Navy veteran here, a representative from the Mental Health Association, and our psychologist here. So we know you got a question out there, and we'd love to see what we have in our studio audience. Eric, jump in first, absolutely. And they're getting their questions ready in the meantime.
Actually, it's funny that you guys mentioned that, because I actually went to the Maryland, can't remember the whole name, but Maryland Workforce. And I went over there to, you know, as I was doing my transition, and I went to sign up for all the help and get more information to for work and benefits what I'm entitled as a Afghanistan and Iraq veteran. And there was a lady who was sitting right next to me, and when the lady, the customer service lady, asked for my name, and I asked her, I said, "That's me. I'm Eric Trivio, and I'm looking for the veterans." And the lady right next to me, she said, "Are you a veteran?" I said, "Yes." And she looked at me and she said, "You're too young.
You're too young to be a veteran.
And you know, hold in one piece." So a lot of people, they just expecting older people, and all, you know, missing parts of the body or stuff like that. But no, I'm fortunate that I went to 2 deployments, and I came back in one piece.
And we're thankful for that. And we should also say that that your wife is with us here in the audience today.
Yes.
And as a matter of fact, I'm going to put her on the spot, actually, if you could. Let's get the microphone back there, because we had a little chat beforehand, and you were describing a story that I think really kind of sums it up in terms of the perspective that you have now that maybe not everybody does have, and how much more sensitized you are to being aware of issues with our veterans.
Well, sir, my husband, who was in the service for 8 years, and as a military wife for that period of time, I kind of get very familiar with, you know, with everything that is what's going on. And at one point, we were driving one weekend, and then on a street corner, we saw one of my husband's co-workers and military colleague. He was with a sign on the street asking for money. So when you are, you know, if any civilian see that, they won't really know who that person is. But my husband knew the person, and he was just feeling very concerned about it. He knew that this person was fine military man, and then he was on the street just with a sign just asking for money.
So
we didn't
really
know if we had to stop or just keep on going, because we didn't want the person to feel what he would have felt when we saw him. And then I work at a hotel downtown Silver Spring, where we have some of the guests are parents and relatives for the Walter Reed injured men that come from Afghanistan and Iraq. Also, the same soldiers, they stay at the hotel when they go for treatment. And one of the things is we saw a person coming for treatment, and then the person left. A few weeks later, we saw the same person on the street asking for money. So immediately, my office, who knows my husband was in the military, we called him and we asked him if he could stop and just talk to him. But these are the kind of things, I guess, if you are not related to the military community, you won't really know what they go through.
And it brings me back to Leanne Dorflinger, our Gold Star mother on the panel today. What is the community really that exists in terms of the support network for the families who have lost loved ones?
Well, when Thomas died in 2004, there really wasn't very much supplied by the military. I mean, Thomas had been stationed at Fort Lewis in Washington State, which ironically was actually about 30 miles away from where I grew up, so I had family in the area there, but we were here, and there was nobody at, no way for them to reach out to us 3,000 miles away to offer their support. One of the things that happened for about 6 months, I didn't know anyone. And about, I guess, about 5.5 months after Thomas died, his first sergeant actually wrote to us, and then he was killed. And I found that out because there was the Stryker Brigade friends and family members. Thomas was a member of a Stryker Brigade. They had a website, and I followed this website even after Thomas died. So I saw that his sergeant had been killed and that he was going to be buried at Arlington. And I left a message, just a comment on there. And then I was contacted by the moderator of the website. And this led to my meeting another Gold Star mom, and she and I talked on the phone. She lives in Oregon, for about an hour and a half, telling each other our stories about what had happened to our sons. And that was really the beginning of reaching out or having some contact with other families, because for a long time I'd go along and I'd say to people, yes, we lost our son, and it sounded like I'd misplaced him or put him away somewhere and forgotten where, and it was very difficult to talk about him. And nobody understood. It was a sudden death, but it wasn't murder, it wasn't an accident. He died in combat, and nobody really understood what that felt like. But Lori did. And following that, I actually met some other Maryland families, and we talked for hours on the phone with them. And in the last couple of years, actually, the Montgomery County families of the fallen have been sort of banded together, partly because we wanted to get the Rockville Library renamed Rockville Memorial Library, and we have finally succeeded in doing that this last Memorial Day weekend. It was officially rededicated as the Rockville Memorial Library. And oddly, because of Facebook now, we can actually find each other. There are so many privacy concerns that we were unable to reach each other, and it became very frustrating because we knew we wanted to talk, but we didn't know how to find you. And my family's phone number is unlisted, so you wouldn't be able to look us up in the phone book easily. But now we've got this tool, and we've been using it very effectively to reach each other. So there is kind of an informal support group of the families of Montgomery County, and actually we sort of ooze out into the other surrounding counties as well, of parents and widows who now we can talk with each other, we can support each other, and sadly when someone is added to our number, we can reach out to those people and be there for them when they need a shoulder to cry on, or just somebody to help them scream, because that's sort of how we feel some days.
Sort of encapsulating everything we're talking about in our discussion about the cost of freedom is that we need a community of support to deal with the cost of freedom. Okay, we got a great studio audience, been waiting patiently out there, and I'd love to see one of the questions come back up here to the panel. Who do we have? Right.
Hi,
in the back row,
Sean.
Sean in the back row.
The question is to the panel as a whole. I know we've talked about a number of programs that we do have in place from the community. I was wondering if there's areas that you've come across, either in your personal experiences, that you think either the college or the community as a whole can improve upon. Maybe you could speak to some of those issues.
We should say Sean, a professor at Montgomery College.
Well, since I am a student, let me tell you that I actually contacted him first. When I first went to the website, I saw his name. I called him, I talked to him for a minute. But then a month later, I went and contacted Ms. Joanne. And from there on, I went through the, they took me by the hand and just showed me the whole thing. And I was worried about going back to college and what it is to go through all this stuff and what am I going to need, what documents do I need. Just, they did all that stuff for me. I didn't have to worry about anything. That was just a relief.
I know people that are fearful of going back to college, no matter what the circumstance of going back, that's a fearful situation.
One thing I'd like to add is, having a few patients who, came back, trying to get back to college is, a lot of them, some of them, they don't really know what's expected of college level, at a college level class. For example, in college, depending on the class, your teacher's not going to call you up and say, hey, where were you today? He may just not care that you weren't in college or you weren't in class. And, there's a certain independence that's not found in high school. And I don't think this is unique to military veterans. I think a lot of college freshmen struggle with this, you know, just kind of knowing what's expected. And, you know, if a teacher working on the front line could maybe not even pinpoint that veteran, but just say, you know, you're in college now, I'm not going to call you if you miss a class. You know, you're expected to do this, that, and other, to kind of ease them into the difference between high school and college. I know a lot of my guys struggled with that, and I kind of, you know, I'm not much of a college prof, but I did what I could to kind of educate them, saying, yeah, you know, you're in college, you know, spelling counts, you're expected to type, you know, just little things like that, you know, made a difference for them.
Jess, as a young person working really in trying to support your boyfriend coming back after 2 deployments, whatever the circumstances, whether it's work, school, what are some of those adjustment issues that were just, you know, really clear that that you could see that were tough on him?
I mean, what's not tough? You know, coming back from combat and coming back to everyday life. Sometimes talked about just being in military, the regiment. You knew what to expect. I mean, of course, you were in combat, but you knew, you know, you were going to be fed that day and who was going to feed you and the kind of food and your MRE that you were going to get. And then coming back to the chaos, you know, that is life in civilian world. You know, that was always, you know, a different struggle. And people, he always talked about in school, people complaining about a quiz. And he'd be like, a quiz, you know, because he's in college now. Are there bigger things to worry about? Why am I worrying about a quiz in my, you know, Bio 101 class? I mean, which is true, and a lot of us take for granted. And then putting on my employer hat, you know, where I work is, you know, we're developing these, you know, fantastic programs. We're coming so far for veterans and military, and completely rightfully so. But don't forget the families. You know, don't forget the Gold Star families. You know, don't forget, you know, the kids and the military families that are behind and, you know, so completely supporting them.
We want to get another question from the audience if we have out there. Pass it. Don't be shy. Here we go. We're going to go back to Jason over here.
Sure. Okay. I guess this question goes out to the entire panel, but specifically, you say you have worked with individuals with post-traumatic stress.
Sure, many of them.
How would you say it differs working with the culture of the military? Because clearly the culture in the military is extremely different than the culture outside of the military. So when earlier when you had commented, you had compared a rape victim responding to and having PTSD can be similar to a combat infantryman who just witnessed several of his buddies get killed. How as far as the treatment, how does that differ specifically relating to the culture of the military?
Okay. Probably more similarities than differences. The military culture can actually be a bit of an advantage. The military culture has made dramatic strides forward in recognizing mental illness, recognizing the importance of treatment. I kind of made a comment back in Vietnam where they just kind of said, "Oh, you're crazy." Well, now, you know, we're a lot more sophisticated. You know, when I was in uniform and my patients were in uniform, you know, I knew I could have him. I needed him for treatment, so he would show up in my office for treatment. And I had, you know, a fair amount of control, not in a bad way, but, you know, treatment compliance is important. And, you know, if I told him, you need to sleep 8 hours a day because sleep is an important part of treatment, you know, I had a certain amount of control over that, a certain amount of control over, you know, medicine compliance, you know, all those things that they need to do to get better. You know, I don't have a civilian practice, but, you know, just kind of from what I've heard, you know, you don't really have that. So in some ways it could be an advantage to be in the military. Plus, you know, all military members, they have free access to, you don't have to worry about payment, does my insurance cover it, things like that. I have to take this pill instead of that pill because my particular insurance company doesn't cover that. You don't have those problems. In some ways, it could be a real advantage.
I'm going to go back to my studio audience here, and if I don't have a question, I'm going to put Joanne on the spot over there and ask you to talk a little bit more. If you could pass the microphone down, Jason. I want to ask a little bit about some of the success stories, if you could. I mean, a little bit more. We see Eric here, but tell us just about a couple of other examples of some of our returning veterans that have come through. I think I went to the right place with that question, or Rose, help out.
No, go ahead.
All right. Okay.
I think that a lot of our military students are successful because they do have the discipline from being in the military. We've had, 4.0 students.
We're going to get him the microphone in a minute.
And, a wide variety of majors that people are successful in.
All right, let's pass it over to our 4.0 student there for a minute. Why don't you tell us a little bit, first of all, your name, and then tell us a little bit about your experience returning to college after combat.
My name's John, and it's been a real easy and real smooth transition. I'll say that the program here has gone out of their way to take care of the veteran population. They do offer a lot of services with the physical education side. The books, that was a great thing that I got offered when I first came here was, them being able to take care of the books because the GI money hadn't started coming in yet. And so it was real nice, real easy transition. They help you with whatever you need. Everyone is friendly. It's if nothing else, it's that smiling face, that person that'll talk to you and work with you and point you in the direction if you need it. So
4.0, huh? What are you studying?
Exercise science.
Just terrific. Jess, you have a chance to work together with different agencies here in our community, seeing this kind of program, knowing what the services you're providing over at the Mental Health Association of Montgomery County. Is it working, or do you think we still have work to do in terms of bringing together all of the pieces to this puzzle?
There's always work to be done. I started in 2008. I started working, Combat to College. I met Rose when I first came on, and I know that they have grown strides. And just the way they're helping so many people. The Montgomery County has the Commission on Veteran Affairs. They're working to make sure that veterans and their families are getting things like the Rockville Memorial Library, through. So there's definitely work being done, but I don't think we'll ever be done.
Okay. We're winding down, so I want to come back fully to our panel here and get some final thoughts from you. Dr. Bender, as you've taken everything we've been talking about today, what do you want the audience to take away from this discussion?
Well, I want to thank the audience in general because there is, I think, tremendous support from the country to our veterans. I think the country learned a lot of lessons from, Vietnam, where, they realized, politics aside, we've got people who are doing a lot of dirty work and need support. So, I would like to thank the country as a whole for that. Another thing I'd like to emphasize as well is just that most veterans, they do their tour, they come back, and they're doing pretty well. Just because you've been in Iraq or Afghanistan does not mean you're going to get PTSD, you're going to have a TBI, you're going to have problems. And people who do have those problems, most of them get better. Post-traumatic stress disorder, I keep using the acronym, is a very treatable mental illness. Most people get better. We expect them to get better.
Okay.
Yeah.
Okay. Well, I cannot thank our panel enough. We've had a great discussion, and Jess, with your help and the work that's going on with the different agencies, we're going to have more of these discussions in the future. And I just want to say thank you to all of our panelists that have been with us today. Leanne Dorflinger, thank you so much for sharing your story. Eric Toribio, thank you for sharing your story. Jess McNerlin of the Mental Health Association of Montgomery County, and Dr. James Bender. We hope you'll join us again next time we have another discussion like this one with the cost of freedom. I'm Steve Simon. Thanks for watching.